In this fourth part of my look back at the construction of Wrenton, it's time to see work on the central section of the layout. More railway than village this time, but the first job was to complete the road and the buildings beyond it. I only had to make a couple of new ones, and I've already described the construction of this small cottage in another video. It was followed by this building, one I remember from the 1950s when its timbers were all exposed. I decided not to model it like that, though. The window frames were printed as usual and placed behind the glazing, a useful technique with these more complicated black and white frames. The remaining buildings had been made as long as 3 years earlier, and had been sitting, waiting for their moment in the sun ever since. I made up my usual scenic section with layers of 5mm foam board, and here the buildings are all in place. The garden fences and walls were fitted, along with all those new trees. In order to apply some ground cover, I removed the trees, making a note of which one went where. The gardens were developed using woodland scenics materials and homemade flowers. Printed or painted paths add variety. You can see the numbers I marked on the back edge of the foam boards, indicating where each tree would go. The front gardens got some attention too. And I started work on the railway cottage ones. Lengths of fencing were cut by the silhouette cutting machine and installed along the edge of the road. In the second video in this series, I showed the construction of the scenic base for the right end of the layout, and this was now glued into place and blended to the baseboard. Back to the centre baseboard, and 2 more main buildings and several smaller ones were needed. I didn't photograph the goods shed before installing it, so here it is in place. It's not based on any particular prototype, but hopefully works okay with the station buildings. Ratio kit was used for the cattle dock, with brick paper applied to make it harmonise with the other railway buildings. The crane is from Graham Farish, the scammel by Oxford Diecast, the coal staves from Ratio, and the sacks Harburn Hamlet. A grounded wagon, part of a Pico kit, and 3 small scratch-built buildings were added, and one of King Cole's lorries is leaving with a load of sacks. The signal box is also scratch-built, but used the etched window frames that come in the Ratio interior kit. All those internal details are there, but can only be glimpsed by shining a torch into the building. Making the steps was rather a challenge, but worth the effort, I think. The parts were cut with the silhouette. After adding some scenic material, the central module was done, and after 4 years' work, I now had a completely covered baseboard. But there were still some things to add or change, so perhaps the subjects for another video.